Hey everybody, Brayden here. Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be covering round number 4 of the Mississauga Summer under 2100 section. I am playing against Mohid now, who's having a relatively good tournament and has been playing well in the past few tournaments he played in up to this, so he's definitely someone to watch out for. And let's get into the game. I'm playing with the black pieces, as expected, as I had white in the first and third round, black in the second, so naturally in the fourth I'll have black as well. And let's see how the game goes. Mohid played d4, I played d5, and then he played e3, which I didn't do any preparation before the game because there wasn't really enough time, unfortunately. But I was kind of not expecting the move. It's a good move. The whole idea here is if you're kind of worried of some like Queen's Gambit accepted lines where maybe black tries to hold on to the pawn weirdly, then e3 immediately is just a way to avoid it, where now, for example, knight f6, c4 is definitely playable. You just are kind of limited and you have to play e3 structures, but you can totally get normal positions here. For example, you can get like you can get a Moran, which is a very, very popular opening. But, alright. Knight f6 was played. Bishop to d3. c6. Knight to d2. Bishop to g4 here. So I wanted to get my bishop to g6. I thought I'd be happy with it here. I don't think that's horribly wrong. f3, bishop h5. G4 looked also, or h4 looked a little interesting. The whole point is maybe they go g4 and h5 really quickly, but of course because their bishop's on d3 I can always trade it off. So that's kind of the idea behind bishop g4, is if I can get it to g6 in time, then I can trade, or I can play h5 in time, so they're not in time to trap my bishop. But instead g4 was played immediately, bishop g6, and now h4, and luckily I can take on d3, so it's not really the end of the world. I took on d3, c takes d3, and now h5, which is somewhat of a key idea here, because if I don't play h5, then white probably can. Even if I play g6, h5 is probably a very likely move. This doesn't look that bad. So I always want to watch out for those, because I used to play a lot of King's Indian, and you would see these crazy attacks on this side of the board, and that's something I would want to avoid. So h5 from me is kind of like a Caro-Kann idea, where all of a sudden we get a position like this where, yeah, they probably should play g6. I think practically it makes the most sense. They didn't. But if we get this h5 move in, we're kind of happy, because it's going to be harder to break through on the king side for us. So knight h3 was played. I played g6. And my opponent made a dubious move here. They played king f2, and I think the idea was to cover the g3 square. Like if they castled here, I think their concern was that g3 could be weak. Like queen c7 already attacks the g3 square, but they could probably just go king g2, and I think their rook is still better on f1 here. But also, more importantly, after queen c7 they have f4, which is a lot more promising, because now they have moves like f5 coming, and this is actually something to be concerned about. So yeah, one line could go f4, bishop g7, and f5. And I think that this is just a complete mess, and white should be actually relatively happy about that mess. It's probably slightly better for black, but it's anyone's game. It's not really something that can be easily evaluated. So here, after king f2, I'm able to get my king castled relatively quickly and not have to worry about any f4, f5s. I always have e6 as a response anyways. Bishop g7, queen b3, queen c7 to cover the b7 square. And it also makes it harder. The king wishes it was on g2, because if it was on g2 here, then there would be no queen h2 problems, and the rook could go to like e1 or f1. Here, they'd have to waste more time by playing king g2 and then rook f1. So that's kind of a problem. Mohid played queen to a3, and then I played knight b6, which is not really the best try. I should probably just castle. The pawn doesn't matter if it's taken, because the best shot is just going back. And then after rook e8, the e-file only benefits black here, because white's king is weaker than black's. But I played knight b6, being a little bit more greedy. My idea was I'm going to castle, and then I'm going to try to go for e5 here. So knight b3 was played. I castled, bishop to d2, knight c8. That's something I wanted to play. I was a little bit worried of e5, bishop b4 here, and bishop to d6. I thought this could be concerning. So I just completely avoided it with knight c8. That just covers the d6 square. And if they play bishop b4, I can just play rook e8, and then e5's coming anyways. So not as much of a concern. Okay, so knight c8, rook a c1, just to go opposite of my queen. And then I play e5. So e5, white does have a funny reply here, queen a5. That is quite good, actually. And the idea here is, if we trade, then we're not really happy about this because we can't play b6, c6 falls, and b7 is not fun to hold either. So we can't really trade, unfortunately, surprisingly. And if we play b6, this queen takes d5, and it's kind of a similar situation where, well, we don't really want to trade, do we? So move like rook d8, queen to c4, knight d6, queen c2, e takes d4, and actually e4 is very important here. And this could be a lot worse for white, honestly, so this isn't the worst way to continue. But queen a5 is very hard to see. That d5 is hanging. Of course, one thing to mention is you're always like scared of if queen d7. Knight c5 is not a good move here. It's important to note because, well, now there's like b6 problems in the future. Instead, after queen d7, there's bishop c3, which amazingly is totally fine because after takes and everything takes. White's knights are okay. They're fine. And yeah, black definitely has a slight edge here, but computer says it's slight, so it's not really much more than that. It does feel a little airy because of the king, but we can always imagine some sort of like sacrifices now. It feels like that might even be in the air soon. And in the meantime, it's not immediately obvious how we're going to be able to attack the white king. So that's important to mention. Instead, bishop c3 was played. I played knight d7. I want white to take, and they did, which just helps me because now after taking on d3, taking on e5, I have knight takes d3 as a threat, which is a huge problem. And if they play something like rook h to d1, there's actually a funny move here, knight g4 check. At the very least, should be fine because we can just pick up this knight and things get opened, and this does not look good. Knight f4 was played instead, of course, because they didn't want to allow any knight g4s, and they wanted to defend d3. So I played rook e8, natural move, just targeting the pawn in the future. Knight d2 was played, and now I played knight e7, trying to go to the f5 square, because they don't really want to play e4, because then this knight's also hanging again. So for example, e4 here might be a little tempting, just because it prevents knight f5, but knight g4 check at the very least just kind of immediately stops that plan. And this knight would be hanging, and even if it's not, we can just look at a position like this. Even d4 looks quite tempting here. This just looks like a huge problem. Even if it's a little bit of a mess, the messes here aren't as bad as like the previous game where we didn't really want to allow a mess so easily, because, well, their king's a huge problem. Like it's not really safe, so messes should relatively favor us. So I haven't calculated these lines really, but just looking at it naturally without a computer, this feels very, very good for black. Bishop b4 was played instead, and now I thought this was the perfect time to make a semi-sacrifice by playing d4. And the big problem here is that everything just feels extremely weak. Like if they take, then even knight d7 feels not even that bad, but I think my idea here was knight c4. I'm pretty sure. Knight c4, or actually no. My idea here was knight g4. My apologies. And if king to g3, then there's knight d5. Yeah, this was it. And this is just a huge problem. And even if I don't find that, even this move, knight e3 or knight f5 should do the trick. Knight f5 I think is better. I think that's what I was planning in the game. Knight f5 check here, and everything just kind of falls because d2 is still defended for the moment, but you can see this bishop having to move at some point. Like the rook is just going to come in eventually. So like for example, if they move, then takes. We don't really have to assess further than this to know that it's winning. So that's important. But yeah, so knight e4 was played. I took on e3, and king takes e3. So I'm again pretty happy here because now the pawns are split. f5 is gonna be hard to play. My knight has a beautiful square on f5 to go to, and everything's just kind of playing. So knight f5 check, king e2, knight d4 check, and king e3. So I was gonna take. I was looking at it for a little bit. This looked a little less clear to me. Queen d7, rook takes f3, knight takes f3, king takes f3. But this is totally fine because queen g4 check and then queen g3 check just picks up the knight here. And when we look at the remaining material balance, we just notice that we're up in exchange. So this is for sure winning. And yeah, so that is important to remember that there's always these queen g4 checks or queen g3 checks. The king is just horribly misplaced, and it's kind of all thanks to king f2 earlier on. Knight f check was played, though I repeated the position just once. King to e2, and now I played queen to d7. So the idea of queen to d7 was just to have the knight defended. So if I go for knight d4 check and then taking on f3, I can just retreat the other knight. So let's just say they waste a move. Now the position makes more sense where rook g3, I can just run back if I want to, so I can keep the piece because I wasn't sure of the complications. I'm pretty sure I was getting lower on time, so I wanted to be sure of that. And that was the idea there. So instead, after queen d7, we saw bishop to e1, but now knight d4 check and knight e takes f3 just kind of wins immediately. I mean, it was already winning anyways, but this is pretty clear to see that it is winning. And after my opponent played the move rook h3, black just has an immediate knockout. So we don't have to worry too much about the game going on much longer than it will. So, all right, black to move and win. It's not an extremely hard move, but it's easy to miss from the opponent's side when they're already in a worse position. So the move is knight takes e1, and the idea is that it just can't be recaptured. We're threatening knight c2. So that's why in this position after knight takes e1, my opponent just resigned because either they're down a piece and their king's in the center, or they take and they're just down a queen and their king's in the center. So it's just lost at this point. So yeah, that's how the game went. And I think it was mainly just because of this king f2. I think otherwise this would have been a completely different game, and that pretty much covers it for this one. I don't think there were any huge mistakes on my side. I think for the most part what I played made sense, but it didn't really feel like anything special anyways. Yeah, that's going to cover it for this game. So I will see you guys in the last round of the Mississauga Summer Under 2100 section. See you there. Bye-bye.